I would like to kick off. So welcome to our Thursday drone dates. This is the Women in Drones Africa Fireside Chat. And welcome to everybody who's on here. We see a few new names and a few new faces. And this is what's so exciting about this platform, is that we have our regulars and we also have new people who join every week. So it's just so exciting. So this is our friendly, chilled chat that we have every week. And specifically for us in South Africa, where it's so cold right now, just imagine we're sitting around a fire chatting. So that's the whole point. Okay. So I am super, super thrilled today to introduce our friend Gary Vermaak, who's going to be talking to us today about a drone logistic system for Africa. And Gary is focused on renewable energy. He's an advisor in the space and consultant. He also focuses on air mobility, e-mobility ecosystem. He's a futurist, a practical climate warrior. We love that. Project developer, project manager, strategic planner, techno-economist and trainer. And he's actively involved in renewable energy and waste to energy for the mining industry. And he's going to be telling us all about that and more, but specifically talking about this topic of creating a drone logistics ecosystem for rural Africa. So Gary, I hope I did you justice with that intro. I know there's a lot more, but the floor is yours.
Okay, I'm just trying to sort out something quickly. For some reason, have you enabled sharing yet?
Oh, hold on. I thought I had, but I will. I think, Louise, you may have to do that from your side. For some reason, I can't do it. So you'll just have to make Gary a co-host, please.
I've just done that.
Okay.
Should be able to
let me just see if I can share now.
Perfect.
Okay. Let's hope no technical glitches, and here we go. Right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you, Kim, for the introduction. Really appreciate that. And it's really great to be talking tonight here. And I was quite surprised and pleased to be here. So I'm going to talk about a drone logistics ecosystem for Africa, and it's really around opportunities to serve the rural areas. And we'll get into more of the detail now. Just not sure why. Okay, who is it? We are an open, global, and multidisciplinary network of companies, universities, and government entities to stimulate collaboration and standardization. We want to bring these businesses, academics, and regulators, financiers into the same space. And why we want to do that is to stimulate progress and innovation in the drone delivery industry, and also to ensure integration with the existing global courier and package delivery ecosystem. And you'll see why we say that. And why we wanted is, most of the companies that we are dealing with are early stage startups. They have limited access to funding, manpower, and expertise. A lot of it is guys that have started in their garages, the future Bill Gateses. The drone could serve as a sharing platform for these companies to expertise joint development of products, working as consultants, as subcontractors for each other, or any other form of cross-disciplinary / cross-border collaboration. Okay. So who's our members at the moment? We've been making announcements. We actually only started on the 7th of July. We officially launched. We were putting out teasers for about a month before. We've been working on this for quite a long time. We launched on the 7th of July this year. So amongst drone manufacturers at the moment, we have free space operations in Australia, FreeSpace are quite a dynamic little company. Not so little anymore either, but very dynamic. Came out of the drone racing world and built a very nice heavy lift drone. In fact, it's the only drone that I'm aware of that can actually do de-stringing of power lines. And this week they actually, and I would suggest you have a look at it, they've actually were involved in the stringing of a power line now. So it's the only drone that's doing this. So there's major opportunities there to replace helicopters. I think all of you are aware of, have heard of incidents where, helicopters have crashed while stringing lines. We have 2 other companies that are at the moment observers pending. We're hoping to make announcements soon, Highfly and Independence. On the software side, we have a company called Tramigo. They are developing the GPS systems and the locking systems for drone boxes, the drone delivery boxes. And we have companies like Unisphere, Plank, Unifly, and Armored Air Cargo. On the software side, parts and equipment, we have Ergo, which is the company that I also represent as VP for Africa. Ergo have developed a unique delivery box, which we're hoping to be the standard, because I think there's a major opportunity here, like the shipping container, for a standard container makes everybody's life a lot easier. We have Nordic 24/7 who do fridges specifically for deliveries, and this big thing now with vaccine deliveries. We have Sign Power, who we made an announcement yesterday. They're from Portugal. They develop EV charging and also aircraft charging and power systems for airports. So they're going to be a major player in the whole advanced air mobility field going forward. And then we have Like a Bird that are pending. On the other main thing with it is, drone pads and vertiports are a big thing now. We're all aware of this, the major company, I won't mention their name now, I'm still trying to convince them to join as well. But one of our first members was Dragonfly Pads out of France. They've developed a portable, automated vertiport, a drone port actually, more like it, that can either be in a 20-foot container, so full charging, maintenance facilities, cargo handling, etc., or because most big cities are built on rivers, and the only real estate left in most cities is on the rivers. We've even seen some of the heliports out there and helipads actually on barges that are moored permanently along the river. And then the other company is Valkyrie, who's on the other side of things for the automated delivery pads. So effectively, safely store your package when it arrives, take receipt of it, etc., and then store it. And then on the operator side, we are busy talking to Delta Aerospace and Astral in Kenya. On the university side, so far, we have the Uniten University in Malaysia. They are focused on more on the power side, and then we have University of Twente in the Netherlands. So that's who's joined up so far and who's pending as potential members. If you look at, one of the big drivers, and probably the best thing that happened to the drone industry, but unfortunately not for the rest of us, is the COVID-19 pandemic effect. It's accelerated the expansion of the drone delivery market. We've got companies like Nano, for example, in Ireland, got very much involved in helping, the elderly in terms of getting goods to their houses. And that's really based around SUAS, the small UAS, as the FAA like to call it, under 25 kgs or 55 pounds, maximum takeoff weight type drones. And really, a lot of it is around the delivery of medical and emergency supplies. And then we have some courier and parcel delivery and retail drones partnering with drone startups for delivery. And those, some of them and some of the partnerships there. I'm sure you'll all recognize companies like UPS, DHL, FedEx, and then also, the major players like Walmart, for example, iFood, although, I don't think most people in South Africa won't know them, and then the drone manufacturers that they're working with. So there's a lot of people in this space already doing some very interesting things. If you look at the drone logistics ecosystem, these were the first 5 members, and so this is really just a graphic of what it looks like, the drone pads. This is the proposed barge we're busy working on, with these companies. So the whole idea is to be able to, have a, anything from a secure box to just a cool box for vaccines. You have the drone that delivers it. You have the place to land and take off from, and then you have the actual boxes. If we move on, and this is where, what we've tried to do is show the picture of the drone logistics ecosystem within logistics. So what we say is, if you start right at the bottom on the left-hand side, we start with a factory which has a little drone pad. They put it into the box. So you've ordered your new DJI drone. They put it into that box. They know where it's going. It gets delivered to the closest vertiport, or it's the distribution center, which can have a vertiport with it. From there, it could go by electric helicopter, other eVTOL, or by truck to the airport. From the airport, it goes into a standard LD3 container. I think most of you are aware of, for the A320, B777, 787, and that can hold 300 of these boxes. So effectively, there's 300 drones going all over, to say South Africa. Lands here, it goes to the airport, it's driven to the closest distribution center to you. Then, so that takes care of, the big distance. Then you go your 10 to 100 miles, delivered to a drone port closest to, say, in Centurion. Then last mile, same day delivery, either by bicycle courier in the city centers, or by drone to your office drone pad. So that's how we see this whole thing. And built around this, and where we got involved was on this drone box, is provide that lightweight, safe, traceable container that can be used for the entire route. So, it's sensitive and expensive items. You really don't want your $12,000 or $1,000 iPhone 12 disappearing en route to you. Especially if you're going to order it from the States through Amazon. So, we want to make sure it gets to you. So there's track and trace. We all know that, anything can be opened with a crowbar or a pick, but generally by having a secure locking system, at least, the casual thief can't, dip his hand in and help himself to a new phone. Sorry, just going the wrong direction there. So, why a rural drone logistic ecosystem? I think, most of us are aware, and even in parts of South Africa, we got bad roads, patchy electricity transmission networks, limited rail networks and infrastructure. And that's a big problem, in most of Africa. It means that many parts of the continent will be left behind in the world economy. We see drone logistics as the jumpstart to these rural economies by providing not only direct access, but also creating remote electricity and other infrastructure necessary for these operations, which then carries forward to the communities they're serving. And all of this is, provides the facilities necessary for passenger flights, law enforcement, air ambulances, and other health services. So we see the win and win. It's not just about the commercial, but from this is all the other good stuff. So how we see the drone logistics ecosystem in the two opposite corners, bottom left, top right. We have a city environment. That's Nairobi in the top right. So you could have a portable drone port there, or you could have the floating one. At an airport like Lanseria in the bottom there, you would have just one of those containers set up. So as the goods come in, they sorted and placed and sent out. So effectively, deepest Congo, you could, on the Congo River, you'd have one of these little barges. But then somewhere, for example, in the middle of, for example, you'd have one of these drone ports, a little place outside Uppington, and they'd land and drop off the stuff. And also, you can see, you'd have something like a solar panel, and that providing power for that in local operations. So we see it as opening up the world. If you look at the global package and delivery industry, it's actually worth about 300 billion. A company like FedEx in the last year moved 2.7 billion packages. It is astronomical. You think about it, and those packages are anything from, a simple credit card right through to big items from Amazon. So, and in developing countries, we must remember, we all talk about sustainability, but drones will actually compete with electric, motorbike, drone delivery vans, trucks for the mid-mile, bikes, motorbikes, and delivery vans for the first and last mile. So it's going to be a tough competition, and in different situations, different solutions will win out. That's just the way things always work out. But in developing countries like in Africa, I think is a key part of growing this industry by serving these communities that aren't served at the moment. And that's everything from agriculture, industry, governments, all those clinics. This just opens up so many things for these communities, and in ways that were impossible given the limited and bad road and infrastructure we have in these developing countries. I mean, there's parts of Africa that I've been for a whole season, and if you're really unlucky, it could be years before they fix that bridge that washed away during the rainy season. So this just makes it so much better. So in closing, the future is bright for drones in Africa, and opportunities exist for. This presentation was also to a Canadian forum the other day, so that's I'm talking about Canada. I'm not picking on anybody or being nice to anybody, but to partner with African companies to help and grow this national ecosystem. We believe governments have an important role to play, and really it's around facilitating the opportunity by incentives, and also upgrading the ATC, implementing the use space and the regulations, which is so important for us to do BFLOS flights, and take away all the red tape. And then there's a lot to do, and it's not going to be easy, but I think we're all up to this challenge. So thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me, and please, any questions you have.
Gary, thank you so much. It's just really nice to, well, the way you describe it, ecosystem, it's so nice to see that, because we can all imagine it, but you've made it super clear. If anyone has questions, just raise your hand or put something in the chat. Gary, I think from my perspective, we often, dare I say it, talk about the fact that, and I know the Drone Council talks about this a lot, we're behind in South Africa, and why is it that, oftentimes it's seen as a humanitarian thing, or it's seen as, a handout, or it's seen as, kind of global companies needing to help Africa. But how is this going to be commercialized? Because if it's a project that's led by an NGO, for example, that's not sustainable past its contract. But how is this going to get commercialized? I see that slide of members. Are these companies that are going to sponsor this in the first instance, or how is that actually going to get going and commercialized?
Look, I think if you look at what's happening at the moment, I think we can all, thank the health industry, precisely companies like Zipline, because they're actually opening it up for all of us. My camera just won't go back on now. There's a conflict somewhere, and I just can't figure out where.
That's okay.
Different software I have, but I think they are opening this up in terms of setting the precedent, and also moving governments in the right direction, which is great. From the point of view is all of these companies, none of them can do it on their own. We're not all Walmart. We don't all have Walmarts and other big companies behind us, but we do have the ability by working together to get these things in the end, the more voices that stand up and scream and shout and demand attention, the better it is for everybody. Even if there are small voices, but small voices become quite a roar, as we've seen over and over again. With anything from rioting, that as soon as people come together, I think we can mobilize everybody, work together to build something like this that's tangible and demonstrate how well it works. I think we will go a long way with this. Each company has money to put into their part of the picture. So putting it all together, you start putting a lot of money, and then the big investors start taking notice. I'd love to have some of these big investors in the advanced air mobility start taking us a lot more seriously at this end of the market. It would be great.
Absolutely. So can you let us into where you think the first actual deliveries might take place, in which country?
Personally, I think that Astral Air in Kenya,
Yes,
the Guardian family, I think they are very well positioned to do that. The Kenyan government seems to be very receptive, and because their system is very much based on the FAA, EASA, as things get approved there, it's a lot easier, and they've come a long way to do that. The other thing with Astral Air is the fact that they are, they're already in global logistics ecosystem. If you look at, they've got everything from a 747 right down to Fokker Friendship, and they're flying to, I think, 60 odd countries globally. So they're really very well positioned. They are taken very seriously within Kenya itself and within Africa, as an airline or cargo airline. And then, they've recently purchased the FlyOps. So they have the aircraft, are doing trials and things like that. So, the first commercial, I think I would put my money on in Africa then.
brilliant. Were you on the cargo summit today, Gary?
Yes, I was. Yes. Yeah.
How interesting, though, for those of you who weren't on, there was a Africa Cargo Summit, and they actually, I think the keynote speaker was a minister in the Rwandan government, right? And I thought that was just fascinating how she is, was sharing how open they are. And as long as, there's engagement with the Civil Aviation Authority, there's room for operators and innovation. And people got very excited about that.
Yeah, no, and that's what we need to see. Governments to start seeing this, and I think a lot of, Rwanda's doing some amazing things in the aviation space. They've got one of the fastest growing young airlines in the world. Buying new aircraft. Uganda as well. But good to see, that they are realizing the value of aerospace, and particularly the value of, this type of aerospace. We're dealing with regional and rural needs. So that is really great.
And are there any African players that have put up their hand or that have been approached to join as members, or is it really, the big players who can afford to do this without flinching?
No, look, from our side, membership is free. It's open to any players in the companies. We also open to government. We are talking to a local council in West Virginia that are very interested. They're setting up an advanced air mobility subcommittee of the council specifically. So we open to all of that. As we said earlier, we have universities, but also companies. So long as there are companies that are active in this industry, from startups right through to the biggest players, we welcome everybody to join. So we have a process just to make sure actually they are a real company, and they are actually active or building something. But that's the way it works. So everybody's welcome. We are going to run it as a free of charge organization. The point is not to make money out of this. I think it's really about working together. And this is how we believe we can grow this. After a year, we'll have a look and see where we go to from there.
Brilliant. There are a few comments and questions, Gary, that I'm going to read. So Craig Wood says, well done, Gary. Impressive presentation. Nicely explained ecosystem for dummies. Brilliant.
It works out. No,
well said. And then Zolani Radebe says, how will the system work for a place that has a high air traffic like Joburg or Cape Town, talking with regards to so basically the integration of unmanned with manned?
I think, look, that's a big problem we're going to have to solve, specifically around Gauteng, the airspace anywhere in the world. It's a big issue. But if you look at Johannesburg, Lanseria is probably the ideal base for anything because it's also got a lot of open space around it. So unlike Tambo, which has been built around, most of there's suburbs on just about every side of Tambo now. But there are issues around that. But with Lanseria, I think it'll be a lot easier to operate. To split the airspace, open up specific drone corridors. I think that's the key aspect. Yeah, I know a lot of people talk about dynamic corridors and all sorts of things, and everybody being able to fly wherever they like. But I think the reality is we're still going to have flight corridors, and I think we are going to have specific drone corridors where we'll try, where they'll try and keep the drone traffic out of the corridors that are being used by the big aircraft. And generally, I think the airspace is pretty well controlled in Gauteng, considering the number of small airfields we have operating. We have two major airports in this area. We have two major Air Force bases. All of that, it all works. It can be done. We can fit everybody in. I think even Lanseria, we've got that industrial airfield quite close, the industrial park with an airfield. That's extremely close to Lanseria, but it's working well. Well controlled, everything is sort of fits together nicely. But we can do it. The quantity of drones, especially the small UAS, could become a problem. But I think, like everything, air traffic control is going digital. I have regular debates with somebody on LinkedIn. I'm sure many of you are aware of those debates. Who actually works for Saab on the digital, control systems. But that's all coming. It may be a bit overdue. What surprises me most is when you start researching is that even developed countries like the US, there's lots of parts there that there's almost no air traffic control at some of these small airfields in the middle of nowhere. So, we're not that far behind sometimes as well. But we're dealing with similar problems. And when I look at the drone logistics ecosystem, if you think about it, Northern Canada, Alaska, it's very similar to what we've got here. So, these things can work and can be made to work. And we can learn from each other.
Gary, I'm assuming that you're speaking to people like Sonette Koch, who is part of the ATM, I'm trying to see if I can remember, ATM CNS Implementation Committee?
Not yet. I would like to talk to her, yeah.
Okay, can I connect you to her? Because this is where they're trying to figure out ATM and UTM, and there are a number of committees, but that's a national committee that's it's a working group that's basically coming up with a roadmap for that ecosystem, which is ATM, UTM, drone ID, all of that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll connect you to Sonette. And I'm assuming also, Dean Polly. So I'll connect you to him as well. He has got a really nice like a software solution for the creation of these drone corridors.
Yeah.
So he might want to join your membership.
No, that would be great. Yes.
Amazing. If there are any other questions, just raise your hand. But Zolani, thanks for asking that question. And when you and I chat next week, I'll catch you up on some of the work that's going on in that space as well. But that's certainly a big one to solve. David Gurin, if I've pronounced that correctly, apologies if I haven't, says, hi, Gary, thanks. I also enjoyed your input at the Canada African Drones Business Forum. That's nice feedback. I read that it costs about $1,730 for a drone pilot license, an RPL in Kenya. I think it's also expensive in South Africa. Is this a barrier?
I think it is, but then, even just becoming a private pilot, is expensive. But I think a lot can be done to reduce those costs. I think, what I really like about the US is, I don't know, if many are aware of the Civil Air Patrol, where, they provide kids from all communities with the opportunity, mainly focused, feedstock into the US Air Force and, other aviation branches of the Navy and that, Marines and that. But, it's a good way of, providing that, statement. And I think one of the biggest problems we have at the moment, aviation in general, is during the Cold War, we had everybody with training pilots. And then suddenly the Cold War ended and everybody sort of started cutting back. And we're seeing that now in the aviation industry. I believe in the United States, $50,000 sign-on bonuses now again for airlines. So you have to, unfortunately, it's one of those things like a university degree. And I'm thinking about what an average university degree in the United States now. Even in South Africa, not cheap these days to study. So, it's something it's an investment that you make into the future. But I think a lot can be done by government to reduce the cost, to provide training. I think there's a lot of opportunities around simulated training, for us to actually get these people trained a lot cheaper. But, it all, everything is, dependent on all sorts of things. And, I think, the fact of the matter is, no matter what kind of pilot you are, if you want to be a commercial pilot, there's a lot of learning you've got to do. There's a lot of exams you've got to write. And there's a lot of hours you've got to spend actually in training to get to that level. And I think it's no different for a drone pilot, especially if we're going to be operating BFLOS. I think if you look at the US military, the requirement for a drone pilot in the US Air Force is you have to have a bachelor's degree. You do an officer candidate school. And then you have to do 40 hours of normal flight time, similar to the student pilot does, just for a basic private pilot's license. And they actually say, look, I think a lot of it is related to the nature of the job, but the dropout rate for drone pilots is almost, in the US Air Force, almost as high as that for fighter pilots. So, it's extremely, the standards are extremely high, and I think we're going to see the same thing happening because they've been doing BFLOS now. I know the South African Air Force was doing BFLOS flights in the 1970s using CENTCON drones for surveillance and spying missions. US a lot longer than that. So we've got a lot to learn from the military in terms of what's required to be a drone pilot in a BFLOS situation.
Gary, I think you're right. And David, I guess the comment I would have there is the RPL as it stands right now with what you can do, it is expensive for someone to self-fund. And by the way, that amount you mentioned there is literally only to get your multi-rotor rating in the first instance. If you want to get a BVLOS rating on top of that, that's another amount at the same cost. And then if you want a fixed wing rating, that's another rating. But I think the pilots the remote pilots or UAV pilots, which would be part of these projects would be highly skilled And I suspect that given where the manned commercial industry is now post-COVID, etc., and how long it's going to take to recover, I suspect a lot of our commercial pilots are probably going to do this kind of work as well, and they definitely won't earn that much money compared to what they were earning before. But it'll be very interesting to see what kind of training would be required. But it definitely is a barrier to entry. David, you have your hand up. Please, please go ahead. You're still on mute.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Gary. I appreciate your replies. It was more of a leading question, possibly. I mean, the article I read was accusing the Kenya CAA of trying to make money out of it because their earnings from conventional aviation are limited, of course, with COVID. But I guess the more important point for this discussion from my perspective is that the infrastructure costs, to facilitate particularly BVLOS flights are quite enormous. Perhaps we don't understand them yet. Gary, I really like your presentation. Again, you talk about how the supply chain fits together and where drones are a part of that, and then the drone ports, etc. Yet there's still the electronic conspicuity bit, the tracking, the surveillance, the corridors, how is that connectivity going to work? Is it going to be through LTE, mobile phone towers, or satellite comm, etc., etc.? So who pays for that, and where does that money come from is one of the bigger questions, I think. Thank you very much.
No, it is. You're very right, David. And that's one of the things. But even today, in your normal civil aviation, generally funded by governments, by airport taxes, by that type of thing. So, the governments will find a way to fund these things. The question is, to actually get them to spend the money in the first place is going to be the big challenge. I mean, if you just look at how many countries still have, old analog radar systems, air traffic control systems, there's a lot of work that's required to upgrade, the commercial aviation side of things, let alone add all these drones and other aircraft that are going to be in our skies flying BFLOS very soon.
Let's see, Gary and David, thanks for that question and comment, and all of those are so valid. I think you wrote something else here. Also, I'm moving forward with anchoring work to create a risk assessment methodology, ground and air risk, for BVLOS flights similar to the JARIS SORA for the global south for limited resource settings. And the remote locations that may be of interest to drone logistics ecosystem. I assume you are focused beyond South Africa.
Yeah, no, David, we are focused globally. We have members from, spanning the globe already, Australia to the US, US to Europe, and so forth, Singapore, Malaysia. So we, very much open and, no specific country. So we seem to have members from everywhere.
So you guys should definitely connect, eh?
Yeah, I think we are connected, David.
Yeah, Kim, Louise, if I can just say one more thing to respond to Gary. Thanks for the feedback. My issue has been for the last few years, I've been on the ICAO RPAS panel looking at international IFR, and I've been on with JARIS as one of the few voices from the global south in an effort to move the specific operations risk assessment away from the more sophisticated locations around the globe and towards those limited resource settings where the CAOs don't have the capacity, or they are remote locations where we don't have surveillance, we don't have connectivity, and we also don't have data quality for our mapping. So we don't know whether we're flying over sensitive infrastructure or higher levels of population density. So this is, from my mind, I've spent a couple of years pushing towards this, and in the next couple of weeks, this is all as a volunteer. Hopefully we will have a place to locate this and the work will go ahead. And anyone who is interested in following this up and adding from the safety, particularly from the safety perspective, please reach out to me either whichever way you'll see me on African Drone Forum or wherever. So thank you for that.
Thanks, David.
No, that's David, that's fantastic. I do. I'm assuming you're connected to Sinette Koch on some of those working groups. Are you familiar with her?
You mentioned the name before. I don't know the person. I'm really sorry.
Okay, so she's sitting on this national ATM CNS working group, and she's also been on some JARIS working groups. Yeah, so I don't really know, I don't sit on those groups myself, so I'm not sure, but let me connect the two of you. It'll be really, really good. I think you guys have stuff to share for sure.
Thanks very much.
That'll be great. Thank you. Let's see. Zolani says, thank you. Desi says, can you also send the link to the working group? Okay. I don't know if there is a link. I think, Desi, let me look into it. I'm not sure if that's a publicly advertised working group. Yeah. And I think they're still trying to organize themselves, if I understand that correctly. But if there is something I can share, I definitely will. Brett says, well done, Garo. And also One Sky is the new FAA outsource for drone corridors. I think I saw One Sky on your member list, Gary. Is that right? Maybe
No,
I
not
missed
yet.
that.
No.
Oh, okay.
I would like to. Yeah, no.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I don't know why. I'm imagining that list, and I kind of thought that was on there.
Well, hopefully this time next year we'll cover most of the industry. That's the hope. Yeah.
Okay, let's see if there's any more questions. Does anyone else have? Oh, here we go. Let's see. David says ATM integration is going to be complex as there are no rules to allow ATC to separate UAS from conventionally piloted aircraft. Also, flying UAS over urban areas will require highly sophisticated or certified UAS. Yep. Yeah, no one solved this yet, right?
Yeah, no, it is a big challenge. But I think one thing with COVID, a lot of airline pilots I'm aware of have been qualifying as remote, as commercial drone pilots as well. So it's good to have those guys involved as well. I know a number of helicopter and rotary and fixed wing pilots that have moved into the drone space, including people that are retired from the military at very senior ranks as well. So we're getting cross-pollination happening. And people are taking the UAV seriously, which is great.
Yeah. Oh, I think Louise, did you want to say something? Are you trying to,
No,
there you go. You're trying to get yourself off mute.
I am, yeah, I'm trying. Sorry, I hit spotlight by accident. I don't know what I was doing. I do actually have a question, but I don't know if now's the right time.
Go ahead, go.
Yeah, sorry. Hi, Gary. Thank you very much. I was just curious. If I remember correctly, you're referring to small UAS, but I just became aware last year of the FlyOx, that bigger remotely piloted aircraft that can land on water, that can land on land and stuff. And I'm just curious whether or not there is an option for that in terms of all the challenges you've already highlighted that face just the small drones. And I'm just curious because I vaguely recall the Kenyan company, didn't the gentleman say that they were using FlyOx? And I'm curious if that's part of your plan, your logistics plan.
Well, we are, I think, we're definitely interested in that. I think there's a number of players in that space at the moment. You've got Elroy Air in the United States. You've got Sabre Wing, who are developing a very large one. And you've also got a number of players, companies like X-Wing, Surf Air Mobility, that are actually doing, Surf, not the right one, Neo Economy, Merlin Labs. There's a number of them that are already converting existing aircraft to remotely piloted. For example, near Earth autonomy, they're working on autonomous now, but for a number of years, they've been flying remotely piloted missions using the AMAX helicopter in Afghanistan. So, there's a lot of that happening, and I think it'll probably be a lot easier for somebody like the FAA to say, okay, we've certified a Grand Caravan, we've certified the AMAX helicopter, you want to fly it remotely, it's probably a lot easier for them to then certify that for remote operations than than a bigger new drone. So, a UAV, something like the Sabre Wing or the Elroy Air. As these things, the Pipistrel also is another one that's developing a large scale UAV for cargo work. So there's a lot of that happening. So I think, it's going to be interesting to see, but no, I think I definitely see a space for it. How they're going to, put those into the same lanes as conventional helicopters or fixed wing aircraft is going to be interesting. Again, the remote pilots have the same communications with the towers, everything else, as a conventional pilot would have anyway. There are some issues around slight delays and things like that, but I think it can be done. Autonomous gets a little bit more difficult because who you're talking to now. But I think with remote pilots, I think it can be done, and the remote pilots with the level of training that a lot of them are getting now, I think it would be as comfortable as an airline pilot. Talking to the towers, doing all of that, the stuff that a conventional pilot would do.
Okay. Well, thank you. No, I just curious, because I'm again sort of leading on from that. You saw how commercially viable and scalable are small UAS compared to some of these bigger drones that are out there. That's really where some of that question was coming from.
Yeah, I think it's all about horses for courses. You think about it. We use a 747 to fly so many pallets of cargo from New York to Jomo Kenyatta in Kenya. But then we put it onto in most cases even unpack and just pack packages onto a small aircraft to fly into the bush. So it's really you wouldn't fly a 747 into a small airfield. But and I think that's where the whole thing comes. And drones open up so much opportunities, especially the small ones. Something like, for example, flying an organ, by helicopter maybe makes sense where you've got a medical aid that's paying all that, funding for that helicopter. But a lot of items, fly a helicopter, even a Robinson R-22, I think, which is probably around about $300 odd an hour. To fly a small pot out to a remote location or something else, it just doesn't make sense. It makes a lot more sense to use a small drone to fly 20 kg or 25, even 50 kg package out to that particular site. The cost savings are enormous. So we're going to look at it that way, and just drones aren't going to replace everything, but neither are so the helicopters are going to continue doing what they want. I mean, I just look at, for example, the free space that I mentioned. One of the biggest dangers facing helicopter pilots is doing power line work. Everything from just cleaning isolators to stringing power lines. Now, if you can do that with a drone, if you do, God forbid, have a propeller strike, a power line, so you lose, a small drone that's busy cleaning isolators. Do that with a helicopter, eventually, it could be the pilot plus crew and everybody else that's, lost in that case. But it makes a lot of sense. We just got to find the right uses and be smart about it. And I think a lot of people are going to see the benefits of, the different sized drones. And each one will have their own specific target market and their own specific set of use cases. And it's not going to be one size fits all.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Gary, David says, thanks again. You certainly are in touch across industry development. So that's good.
Thanks,
And these are such big topics, right? I was joking this afternoon after the cargo summit, and someone was saying, wow, I hadn't even thought of some of these things. And the conversation went to, well, I'm just waiting for my Starbucks to be delivered from my local store. And the other person said, oh, I'm waiting for my pizza to be delivered. And then the next thing, we talk about, because it's hype and it is everywhere, in terms of the real benefits to things like Zipline and Swoop Aero and some of the humanitarian stuff going on. But I don't think, in our day-to-day, we've got our heads around this, drone cargo ecosystem where you can literally order someone and, there's a cargo drone delivering your parcel to the airport, manned, brings it to the next country. And then, you kind of have the final leg again by cargo drone. And that is just so fascinating. It'll just be so interesting to follow your journey.
Yeah. Well, don't forget that one of these days, all of these old B767s and, other planes that are being used by FedEx and these companies, Airbus has proved that they can actually take a A350 1000 airliner and they can do a complete flight with the pilots never touching the stick. So, everything is possible. It's just how long it takes, for us to sort of sort out all the risks and, all the safeguards and everything else. And, for the regulators, come to terms, because in the end, nobody wants a big, sort of accident on their hands. So, they're naturally, the airlines, the regulators are all, very wary and, sort of taking things one step at a time, which is understandable. Because it just take, for the drone industry, it'll just take one drone coming down in the middle of nowhere and just happening to hurt a child or something, just to set everybody back. So we've got to be very careful. We know what's the art of the possible. We've just got to make sure that it happens in such a way that we're not taking unnecessary risks.
Is there it feels like these discussions have been going on for a long time, and whenever we have a difficult, and I mean this is just on a commercial operation, very simplistic, we just want to fly a mission for a survey, and we have to file a flight plan, and that's all fine. But we've run across missions that have been declined because the location is in the approach path of an airport, and they're like, we can't separate you, we don't want drones here, go away. And we're like, really? Still? Are you still just declining this? It just almost feels to me, Gary, like the regulators and all the role players are all, like, in a paralysis because it's so hard. David's going to have a really good answer to this.
Well, it's not an answer. I'm going to get your point, and I've heard this for many years. Going back a decade ago, I led the air navigation service provider in Australia in attempting to integrate small UAS inside our 27 control zones near aerodromes. And I have to say that industry, and I mean that in the kindest terms, has never come up with a solution. Whereas for this last decade, we've been working hard to come up with solutions. And the fact of the matter is it's necessarily difficult, because if you happen to be in 1A on a 737, you don't want to hit a drone. Or if your HAMS emergency helicopter is landing within that control zone, you don't want to hit a drone. So, I mean, it's nice to be able to say that they still haven't come up with solutions, but we do all have to work together to come up with these solutions. And sometimes there are areas where drones perhaps shouldn't fly. One of those is very close to complex, busy aerodromes. Another one is, unless they're fully certified, over urban areas or large population densities. Thank you for your patience with my answer.
No, it's perfect. Look, we joke about this sometimes, but if it was that easy, it would have been solved, right? So it's not, you've got political, and I can only speak for South Africa, you've got political will and skill that's required. You've got funding that's required, and decisions by huge role players that, have traditionally worked together, but independently. And so, yeah, it's not easy. So yeah, part of me is like, come on already, really? And then of course it would have been solved if it was that easy. So
we still have conflicts in some areas, between small, the small general aviation and light sport aircraft guys, and in some areas, there's a lot of guys who just don't want to put something as simple as an ADSB, the aircraft. And there's not cost. It's just, some people just feel that they don't want people, being able to check them. So, we've got to deal. There's a lot of issues we've got to deal with just within conventional aircraft as well. A lot of airports that sort of won't allow small aircraft to land as well. It's trying to keep, because they're so busy and they've got so many of these big aircraft coming in, and small aircraft. They have to, can't, as they have a longer distance separation and all sorts of things. There's a lot of issues, and these issues will be ongoing. I think we'll never find, something that suits everybody. There will be some regulation and rules that have to be applied.
Gary, thanks for that. David, I feel like David needs to come on to Fireside Chat at some point and educate us even more. This is brilliant. ICAO don't want member states to install ADSB on UAS. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Where do we go from there?
We're just about to close, but I've been pushing hard for this. And if you look at Christian Ramsey, the CEO of UAvionics, he's got a really good blog about alternatives to low-powered ADSB for small UAS. But the fact of the matter is that there are issues about saturation. They're not designed for the ADSB, for ACAS, TCAS systems, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot in this, but certainly there are solutions to the electronic conspicuity piece. And Gary's point was actually about piloted aircraft, pilot on board aircraft having ADSB on board. And you're right, the general aviation community doesn't want to be tracked.
Yeah.
David, thank you for your contribution. It was invaluable. Gary, thank you so much for sharing what you guys are doing. For everyone on the chat, I've actually put the link to the drone logistics ecosystem LinkedIn group in the chat. In fact, I'll copy it so that it's at the last entry, so you can all have it. Daisy says, thank you, Gary and David. Great information, already following. Fabulous. These hours always fly by so quickly, and it's time to end our chat. I really loved this. I learned a lot. I hope everyone else did too. These sessions are recorded. I know Louise and the team are working at getting them up on the website, so we'll definitely have links and things in there. I think there are a few things that I have written down to connect David and Sunette, and Gary and Sunette, and Gary and Dean Polly, and yeah, I just continue to be amazed by the quality of conversation we have on these chats. So thank you so much for being so interactive. We meet, for those of you who are new, we meet here every Thursday at 17:30 South Africa time. And I don't know what the US times are, I'm sorry, but it's always the same link. Follow Women in Drones Africa. Join as a member. It's an amazing platform. We've got a great lineup of speakers over the next few weeks. So if there's no other comment or question, I'm going to call our Fireside Chat to a close for this week. Thank you so much, everybody. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thanks again, Gary. You were great.
Okay, thanks a lot. And chat
Bye.
soon.